Close Pompton Lakes residents worry a plan to clean contaminated groundwater under their homes will force the pollution up into their basements. James M. O'Neill, NorthJersey.com. Pompton Lakes. About 150 residents came out in force Tuesday night to calmly but forcefully voice their distrust of a pilot plan to keep cancer-causing contamination that migrated off a nearby DuPont site from vaporizing up into their basements. The pilot study, proposed by Chemours, a spin-off successor to DuPont, would pump water through a horizontal well into the contaminated groundwater beneath about 450 homes to dilute the contamination, but not remove it. Many of the residents who attended a public hearing on the proposal, held by the State Department of Environmental Protection, said they fear that the pilot test would cause water tables to rise and groundwater to flood their basements, bringing cancer-causing contaminants into their homes. Some residents described the cancers and other illnesses their family members and neighbors have experienced over the years, and blamed the cancer-causing solvents, TCE and PCE, that migrated with groundwater off the DuPont site and started vaporizing up into some basements. They also expressed concern that Chemours has not offered insurance policies to residents in case the pilot study causes flood damage to their homes. Pompton Lakes Mayor Michael Serra told the DEP officials in attendance that the state and Chemours should be able to work out some sort of insurance coverage. Project Director David Epps explains the rules application before public comment at the hearing. In the front row wearing a surgical mask is Richard O'Reffis, a 26-year-old man and Pompton Lakes resident since 2000. He is suffering from lymphoma. The hearing was held to discuss a plan by DuPont to pump clean water into a polluted aquifer that has sat for decades under a neighborhood with high cancer rates. Photo Chris Pedotan, NorthJersey.com. If this plan is so fail-safe and DuPont or Chemours has no worries, they should provide residents an insurance policy to ensure them nothing will happen, said resident Cheryl Rubino. If they're so sure of this plan, they should not have a problem stepping up and insuring the residents. I've called every insurance agency, and there's no way for me to get my own policy. Some residents even demanded that the company buy them out. They questioned why the state would approve a pilot study that did not include any preliminary measuring of water tables around each home in the area, and noted that Chemours estimates that water tables would not flood basements were based only on computer models. Story continues below. Video player closed. The Asbury Park Press analyzed nearly 4,000 water quality tests performed at New Jersey beaches this summer. Here are the 5 beaches that failed bacteria tests most often. Ross Zimmer: "This is a lot of crap, and they're shoving it down our throats," said longtime resident Helen Martins, voicing the frustration shared by many of her neighbors. "I really don't want it. It's not foolproof, it's never been done anywhere else, and I don't think Chemours has any idea how important it is for residents to feel they are safe." Dave Epps, the Pompton Lakes project director for Chemours, said in an interview before the hearing that the thin layer of clean water that would be pumped into the plume by the horizontal well would act as a clean lens, or barrier, to prevent the contamination below to vaporize up into homes. Though Joe Corgra addresses the panel on Tuesday, September 26, 2017, telling them about the illnesses he has seen take place in his neighborhood near the DuPont site. A public hearing in Pompton Lakes was held to discuss a plan by DuPont to pump clean water into a polluted aquifer that has sat for decades under a neighborhood with high cancer rates. Photo Chris Pedotan, NorthJersey.com. There's a concern about water table levels rising, and rightfully so, Epps said at the start of the hearing. But there are some fail-safes included in the horizontal well to allow us to divert water if water table levels got to a point we deemed unacceptable. He said the technology has not been used yet by Chemours or DuPont at any of their other contaminated sites across the country. Residents said they don't want to serve as the company's lab rats and guinea pigs. "The bottom line is I don't feel safe," said Rubino. "I don't feel comfortable with this plan moving forward. We are not your guinea pigs. We should not be the first ones to be put through this before you've shown it works." They also expressed irritation that Epps left the two-hour hearing early without listening to all the residents' comments. "The nerve of this man," said resident Jefferson LaSala. Residents said they want more widespread monitoring, even devices in each basement, to provide an alert if water starts to rise too high during the pilot study. This Pompton Lakes neighborhood sits above a plume of groundwater contaminated with solvents from the former DuPont munitions plant. In background, photo David Bergeland, NorthJersey.com. Vapor intrusion systems have been installed on 333 homes to pull contaminated vapors out of basements, and residents said they were concerned that if water tables rise, it could cause those systems to fail. "If this doesn't work, what happens to us?" said resident Dorothy Mancini. I hope you have listened to the people, because in the past I don't think you have. The groundwater under about 450 homes is contaminated with PCE and TCE, cancer-causing solvents that were dumped at a DuPont munitions facility decades ago and spread through groundwater to the adjacent neighborhood, which has significantly elevated cancer rates. In 2008, officials announced that the solvents were vaporizing up through the soil in some of the basements. The pilot will be conducted by Chemours, a spin-off company that has taken on responsibility for cleanups at dozens of contaminated sites across the country that were formerly owned by DuPont. Cheryl Rubino voices her opposition to hydraulic testing in fear that water being blown underground will affect her home. She spoke at a meeting Tuesday, September 26, 2017, in Pompton Lakes to discuss a plan by DuPont to pump clean water into a polluted aquifer that has sat for decades under a neighborhood with high cancer rates. Photo Chris Pedotan, NorthJersey.com. Workers will install a horizontal pipe about 20 to 25 feet deep and running for about 1,400 feet along a railroad bed near Barbara Drive, just south of the DuPont property. Clean water will be pumped through the perforated pipe, which will act like an oversized soaker hose to let the water escape into the surrounding soil, to dilute the pollution in the groundwater. The Federal Environmental Protection Agency has said field tests show the water level would not rise to flood basements, but residents are not convinced. Superfund Pompton Lakes DuPont site needs Superfund status. Advocates say the Pompton Lakes cleanup has been a long time coming. As far back as 1989, the DEP expressed impatience with DuPont's failure to clean up the groundwater. The off-site migration of the contaminated groundwater is a threat to human health, the DEP said at the time, and requires the most immediate action. In 2009, the state health department found significantly elevated levels of kidney cancer and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, cancers that have been linked in lab studies to TCE and PCE, among residents of the affected neighborhood. CHEMOURS funds for $50 million. Pompton Lake cleanup may be at risk. Toxic backstory archive. DuPont danger was hidden away. The state did not definitively link the elevated cancer rates to the solvents in the groundwater, but did not rule that out as a cause. The pollution has stigmatized the neighborhood, leaving some unable to sell their houses and many worried about their health. Richard O'Reffis, 26 years old and suffering from lymphoma, wears a surgical mask during a public hearing Tuesday, September 26, 2017, in Pompton Lakes to discuss a plan by DuPont to pump clean water into a polluted aquifer that has sat for decades under a neighborhood with high cancer rates. Photo Chris Pedotan, NorthJersey.com. Once the DEP evaluates all the public comments, it will make a decision on how and whether the pilot study moves forward. DuPont installed a pump-and-treat system in 1998 to capture groundwater before it leaves the DuPont site, to keep even more contamination from spreading into the neighborhood. The water is cleaned of contaminants and pumped back into the ground. Lake dredged after years of waiting. Contaminated sediment finally dredged from Pompton Lake. Legacy DuPont deal gave state more tainted soil in 2008, when the state determined that the solvents in the groundwater plume were vaporizing into basements. DuPont began installing vapor mitigation systems on homes. To date, 333 systems have been installed. According to measurements taken by DuPont at test wells in the neighborhood in 2008, the highest readings showed PCE at 260 parts per billion, while the state threshold for cleanup is 1 part per billion. The highest level of TCE found was 100 parts per billion, while the state threshold is 1. The company did a pilot test of a different cleanup method in 2011 and 2012, when it injected soybean oil and then sodium lactate into the soil as a food source to stimulate growth of naturally occurring microbes that could break down the PCE and TCE into non-harmful substances. The results were disappointing, because the groundwater didn't distribute the food evenly or quickly through the plume. Pompton Lakes residents are worried about a plan to clean contaminated groundwater by pumping more water into the ground through a pipe to be buried along this railroad bed. Photo James M. O'Neill, NorthJersey.com. The blob weighs an estimated 130 metric tons and it was produced by a constant accumulation of items that should never be flushed down London's toilets. NorthJersey.com. Reader, share this story. https://njersey.co2east6vrz